Tanveer, we got you, and we have the rest of the team here as well. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, quick reminder for everyone, today's session is recorded. We're doing edition 12 Hair of Gurukul. We have some amazing speakers here with Kevin and Tanveer and amazing companies that are growing and scaling across the US and India. I'll hand it over to Aryan for a quick intro on Gurukul, and then we'll do backgrounds and jump into today's conversation.
Thanks, Joey. Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Aryan Jaiswal, and I am working at the intersection of program management and early procurement of defense projects at IDEX-TIU. It's my pleasure to welcome you all for this 12th edition of Gurukul. Just to set context, Gurukul is an educational series under Indus-X, inspired by the ancient Indian Gurukul tradition. This series aims to foster collaboration and innovation between India and United States. It brings together industry leaders, academic institutions, startups, and innovators for enriching discussions, experiential learning, and the strengthening of people to people ties. This particular edition addresses effective market strategies for defense tech startups and exploring what has worked for those companies that are scaling across both the geographies. This session gathers successful founders who have navigated this challenge, who are building traction with defense customers in both markets and sustaining growth as well. With this, I would like to welcome our speakers, Mr. Tanveer Ahmed, who is the CTO and the co-founder of Digantara Research and Tech, and Mr. Kevin Decker, the CEO of Ocean Aero Incorporations. I'd also like to welcome today's moderator, Mr. Joseph Arora from Defense Innovation Unit, US Department of Defense. Without any further ado, Joey, I won't take further any time. I would like to welcome you to commence this session. Over to you.
Thanks, Aryan, and thanks for that beautiful intro and background for what we're doing here. Quick background on myself. I'm on the Global Partnerships team for the Defense Innovation Unit with the US Department of War, and my role here is today to help facilitate and help drive the conversation. We will be doing question and answers as well, so if you have something, please put it in the question and answer function, and I will get to it as part of the conversation, or we will have 15 minutes at the end of today's webinar to answer those questions. All right, now for an amazing round of intros to learn a little bit more about our speakers today. I will hand it over to Kevin to talk a little bit about his amazing background and what they're doing with Ocean Aero.
Thanks, Joey. Look, I don't know about amazing, but we'll do the best we can. Okay. So, hi, everybody. I'm
I
Kevin
hope.
Decker. Great.
I
I'm
hope.
Kevin Decker. I lead Ocean Aero and have done for about the past 5 years. Before that, I was part of one biotech startup in Boston. And before that, spent about 17 years at General Electric. So it's interesting for me to engage in what I'll call startup business in the innovation space as a very small company after having been literally one of the world's largest companies for nearly 2 decades of my life, starting there from right out of school. So it's been really a fascinating journey for me. I have worked in India very much before while I was at General Electric, and now having done so here at Ocean Aero. That's a pretty interesting experience. Ocean Aero is what we call a builder of autonomous systems for the ocean, both surface and subsurface. We say that we're the only platform in the world that can actually do that. There are many robotic, companies that operate on the surface of the ocean, many underwater, and we're the only one that can transform. So it's straight out of the cartoon Transformers from the 1980s, where it starts as a sailboat and then turns into a submarine and then dives. The applications for that, of course, may be evident to many people on this phone call, but for the sake of completeness, we'll say we are true dual use technology that services the offshore energy space as well as the defense space. Active today in 18 different countries and have pretty decent execution inside the United States military apparatus, both DHS, Intel, and of course the United States Navy, but broadly also executing with partner nations through bilats, multilats, and direct sales, both with FMS and out. So it's been a pretty interesting journey over the past 5 years, headquartered out of Gulfport, Mississippi now, where I'm at this morning at our headquarters. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Joey.
So, no, thank you for that amazing background. And to continue the amazingness, I'll hand it over to Tanveer to talk a little bit about Digantara and what they've done.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me here. I'm Tanveer. I'm one of the founders and CTO of Digantara. I'm an aerospace engineer in by background. We essentially started Digantara as a student project, as a school project in the university, and we had an opportunity, to while we were as students, um, to present what we are doing in conferences in Germany and DC. And I think the space community is really small, pretty warm, right? So they essentially nudged us that what we're doing is not only a student project, but it can, it has a, business potential. So we should start up. And I think that's exactly what we did in 2020. My co-founders, Anirudh and Rahul, my friends then co-founders today, we started working full time on the idea of tracking space objects. Essentially, there's a good amount of objects that we are putting in space, and the traffic in space is getting hard to manage. So I'm today joining in from my home place, Bangalore. So it's notorious. It's known for its the notorious traffic. Those who have been here would know. So traffic is a problem that I relate very very well with. I think that really helped me understand all the traffic problems in space, and is essentially the problem can be understood like this. Consider you guys must have taken a flight very recently, and when you are in air flying, you don't really worry that you're going to crash into any other aircraft, right? So that's not a worry that we with which we fly today. That's essentially because there are robust air traffic management systems in the aviation sector, but traffic management in space, the space traffic management ecosystem is budding right now. It's a problem that companies have just started working in this decade, and we are one of them in the world. I think countable few, and the first and only company in India who's trying to track space objects and maintain custody of space objects, and essentially trying to build that infrastructure layer for space traffic management and space surveillance. And as it has anything and everything with space, even if you have a rock in space that is militarized, so we do have defense use case as well. So satellite tracking, or a jargon called space domain awareness, which entails tracking and maintaining custody of space objects, is essentially a foundation layer and first step towards militarization and urbanization of space. So we essentially use the same core competencies and founding blocks to build end-to-end solutions, both for military application and commercial application for safety of flight. And we are at a place where we are building ground telescopes, space telescopes and space telescopes for tracking space objects. The space sensors that we are building are truly unique. We are one of the first entities in the world to prove that we can put a telescope in space, detect objects from that telescope, and maintain custody of these objects. So maintaining custody is really important. So I think that is something that we do really well, and uh, that's something that we have specialized. And right now we are at a place where we are scaling that capability across with the constellation of satellites. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks for that background. That's amazing to hear. And I'm now excited to dig into some of our harder questions for today. But we want to ease into the stories for both of you. Right? We have a US-based company and an Indian-based company. Both of you are venture backed, and you have stood up operations in the respective other countries as well. And so I would love to start with, can you tell me a little bit about how did you get your start in the US and in India, respectively? How did you get started with your first contracts? And then if you can jump and start bridging the gap of what what inspired you to start thinking about working in India? What inspired you to start thinking about working in the US, right? Where in that journey did this happen? I'll pass it back over to you, Tanveer, to start with that.
So I think I always grew up listening to all the amazing things that space pioneers in the country in India have done, especially Dr. Kalam. So he was someone who was instrumental in the space program, missile program, and he was also the president of the country. And essentially, I think he inspired me so much that I essentially decided that I would want to be in defense and space sector. I don't mind being a fitter and tightening fastener, but as long as I'm in the defense and space sector, I think I would be a happy man for the rest of my life. So that's something that I decided even before I joined university, and I'd also appeared for a fighter pilot evaluation program for the Indian Air Force. Sadly, I did not get through, and I think this is the next best thing that I could do in the in defense and space sector. So I think that's essentially how I was always motivated towards doing something in space. And it's essentially in 2020, I think, when we started. Uh, uh, it was based out of an incubation center in Bangalore, one of the top technical universities in the country incubated us, and that gave us about 100K, about a crore worth grants from the Indian government, and that's essentially, I think, how our first set of uh, at least grants came, and that helped us set up shop and start working very aggressively towards the problem. And once this was there, in about a year's time, I think we got our patent granted. I think one of the first space companies in India to have granted patents, and I think that sort of changed our trajectory. We were able to scale our technologies and start working with end customers in India and globally. And in India, it's the playbook essentially is demos are really important. The end users have very little risk-taking capability. So proving that the system works in multiple conditions and it's very robust, that's really important. And while we were doing this, I think we had opportunities in Singapore. And in fact, our first major check came from Singapore and then from India and US. So Singapore, I think, was the first opportunity where we got to work with an international customer, and that was something that we liked, and it gave us some sort of a confidence that yes, I think we are ready to go global and take the first steps towards international scaling. And with that, we started attending international events. And there's a conference. Sorry. There's a conference that happens in Hawaii. It's one of the sort of the conferences in our sector. And there, essentially, I think our approach was let's meet the end users, and that's the first step what we do in any country that we go right now. I think that's what worked in India, that's what worked in Singapore, and that's what is working in US. We met them, we told, hey, look, this is what we're doing, we would like to be in the US as well. How do we go about it? So I think our end users were extremely helpful. The different agencies of Department of War, um, and the US Space Force has a entity called SDA TAP Lab in Colorado Spring, and essentially they nudged us that would be a best soft landing for us in the US, and that's essentially what we did. We went towards establishing a US subsidiary, and I think we are in a short drive from SDA TAP Lab. Our office is a short drive from SDA TAP Lab in Colorado Springs, which helped us to stay close to the place where we soft landed, and that's essentially where our first set of orders came, the SDA TAP Lab. I think we have two orders, if I'm not wrong, from SDA TAP Lab, and that's essentially how we sort of went towards primarily focus keeping the end user as the as the focus and letting them guide us. I think that's essentially what worked for us.
Tanveer, thanks for sharing, right? There's a few key lessons about engaging with your end users early and then saying, hey, here, communicating, here's that value. So it's great to hear how that's come through and it's working, right, on the international scale here as well. And wonderful to hear that your childhood hero inspired you to stay in the defense and space sector too. So thanks. Kevin, I'd love to hear the story from Ocean Aero's perspective. Where did you get your start in the United States? And then what inspired you all to begin working internationally?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joey. Hey, Tanveer, my childhood hero was Captain Kirk. So I feel like that you did better than I did following the guidance of the heroes. So I ended up in the ocean. I don't know. But Joey, it's a great question. I'd say Ocean Aero got its start in the U.S. by just focusing what we thought was a big need in our U.S. Navy. And when you think about the world 5, 6 years ago, things were beginning to heat up. And we perceived as a nation the need to have more payloads delivered in the ocean than we could possibly do with our current manned state. Said another way, we don't have enough ships in this country to be able to do all that we want to do. And so at some point, you're going to have to figure out a way to do that with less money and to do that faster. It takes years to build submarines and surface vessels for the U.S. Navy. And so we kind of said, look, if only you had a small robot that would be able to carry payloads that you could build quickly and not have a threat of harm to humans on board, wouldn't that be useful? And then we took it one step further and said, well, if that's the case, then the ability for us to last as long as we can on that water, have the most batteries that you can, carry the most payloads, be able to survive on the water against weather and adversaries, wouldn't that be good? And so if you look at our technology today, we call it the Triton, our platform that sails and dives. It has the ability to recharge its batteries on the surface with solar panels. And after it dives, it comes back, soaks in the sun, kind of like Superman, and then it has its energy back, and then it goes back to work. And so just doing that really extends your battery life and capability. And then, of course, if you're on the surface of the ocean and a big storm comes your way, or a bad guy, okay, if a bad guy comes your way, you're dead. You're a robot, right? You're not going to be able to do some damage against forces of that magnitude. So being able to dive and hide beneath the surface really extends your mission set. And so that was the genesis of why we built what we built. Cheap, fast, accurate, carries payloads, lasts a long time. Okay, so that's why we did what we did. Turns out that resonated with the U.S. Navy, and that began our journey. I could write a book on how we did that through a variety of different ways, through the Naval Surface Warfare Centers and DIU and ONR and all the other acronyms. It's a spaghetti soup of different or alphabet soup of different acronyms for the Navy or the military. But the long story short is that we focused on a particular application that 5 years ago was a big deal, and that's called ISR, Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance. If you think back to that period of time, the American withdrawal from Afghanistan was a big deal. The Middle East was the hotbed of activity. The Straits of Hormuz were pirating and all kinds of bad things were happening from terrorist organizations. And surface reconnaissance was very, very important. Now, if you fast forward to today, I think you could argue that the Black Sea, not the Red Sea, is now an epicenter of the world's activity. And that is not really an ISR game. That's what we call MCM, mine countermeasures. A lot of the Black Sea is mined. Both adversary and allies have mined the areas. And that plays havoc with not just militaries, but commercial shipping. This stat is very sad to me, right? That 15%, I think it's 17% of Africa's grain before the war came through the Black Sea through Ukraine, and today it's less than 1%. And the reason for that is not just terrestrial interruption, but it is seagoing interruption of just getting the grain from one place to another. So you have 100 million metric tons of food that is no longer reaching quite arguably the most important place of need on the planet. And so today we focus on mine countermeasure payloads. The Triton is the same, and we're just modifying different payload packages to fit the application. And then, Joey, you asked how we transitioned from that into other places around the world, particularly in this case, India. It turns out America is not the only country concerned about these things. And I think as you get closer to China, you have an increased heightened need for maritime awareness. If not supremacy, then awareness. You think about China's string of pearl bases, Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, et cetera. There is a direct challenge to India's maritime supremacy and maritime domain awareness. That is both above and below the ocean. There are concerns for Chinese submarines patrolling off the coast of India. There are concerns of beyond China, just in piracy and illegal fishing that is surrounding the country. Like it or not, India is a maritime nation. Okay, it has a massive coastline, huge economics coming from the ocean. And so, as I always like to say to our company, 1.4 billion Indians can't be wrong. Okay, so not only is there a big need in India, it is also a very wealthy country and is organized in a way that we can do business with. As opposed to Iran or Russia or something. We as a company servicing the American military, we're not going to do so well servicing those countries. Whereas India is perfect, American ally, perfectly in line with democracy values and close allyship with the American Navy, et cetera. So as we approached India, we said this is a place we absolutely have to be. And then the only question is how. Okay, how do you do that? And let me tell you, around the world, India too, if you're not local, you're nobody. Okay, you're not doing anything unless you have a local presence. And so the very first order of business was to make friends. Okay, we had to find friends. And so I'm not sure if they're on this webinar or not today, but we are very good friends with a company called Anadrone, which services, I believe they're number one in the drone delivery space for the Indian military, at least the Army component, if not the Navy. And we've gotten to know them very well. Anant Bhatia is their CEO. And we decided, hey, if we linked up with them with their expertise in drone delivery and our expertise in building these on the surface, might not that be a great way to leverage their relationships, their distribution base, their manufacturing know-how? And that's what began our engagement in India. So I'll pause there. I could keep rambling for a while on this storyboard, but that kind of brings us from inception all the way to how we began in India. So Joey, if that's good, I'll pause there.
Yes, it's great. And this is the beautiful part of today's webinar. I think there's so much to dig into, not only in the beginning of how do you get the origin in your own country, but as both of you have now pointed out, right, that there's a problem to solve around awareness, whether it be from space or maritime, that is universal. And so I think there's a story here around finding a universal problem set that is meaningful to all militaries, and saying, hey, how do we now begin selling across there? And Kevin, you began with saying, hey, we found some friends in India. And Tanveer, you mentioned, hey, we got engaged, we showed up in the United States and discovered, hey, the SDA TAP Lab is where we wanted to begin partnering. How did you find this opportunity? If I'm a startup that's attending or going to be listening in the future, can you get really tactical with us and say, how should I get started in identifying this type of opportunity?
Yeah, Joey, I'd say the good news is we live in 2025 now. It ain't hard. It was hard 20 years ago. Today, you've got LinkedIn, you've got the internet, you got Google, you got ChatGPT. I'd say start there. You won't be wrong. But if you want an alternative string, these, at least in my space, these trade shows, these industrial military trade shows, it's not like there's 500 of them. There's like 25 of them, right? And of the big important ones, there's like 5. Just go there. Trust me, you'll run into the right people, right? You'll know very quickly who are the big players, who are not the big players, who are people who are fly by night, operating out of a garage, or at actually established reputable companies. That's kind of number one. Okay, that's entry stakes. You do your research and you find the right players, and you'll know them very quickly. This isn't too bad. But number two, you got to vet them. I'd say in my case, we're fortunate in that 20% of Ocean Air was owned by Lockheed Martin. And so that's one avenue. Okay, you can use them to say, hey, look, you've been in this industry for 100 years. Tell me, what do you think about these companies? Also, at least in the United States, and Tanveer, maybe they could help you as well, is it turns out America's got a pretty good intelligence network. Okay. And so if you just call and ask, some of these groups inside the United States who you're working with, hey, check up on this company. Are they legitimate? Are they in any hot water? You can also do regular things like Reuters or Dunstan Bradstreet blacklist checks. There are a number of services that you can vet companies and individuals to see if you're dealing with someone who you want to deal with. So I always recommend do that no matter what. Okay, pick your people. That's going to be easy. Vetting them is actually not that hard either. And then the final step is what I always call as a cultural fit is, do we have a meeting of the minds? Okay, do you think you can work with those people? And I view that as cultural mainly, but also commercially. Do you perceive that we're all going to make money in a certain way together or not? Do you like this business model or not? How greedy are you? Are you looking to make $1 or $5 billion at everyone else's expense? And I'm a capitalist. Okay, I want everyone to make a lot of money, but there are limits on what you can reasonably do. And you may be working with people who are great on paper, great reputations, but just aren't good cultural fits with you. And I got to tell you, right now, today, Aero has, I think it's 27 different intermediary groups around the world. I would say that during the past 5 years, we've cycled through about 50. Okay, because sometimes those cultural fits we get wrong. And so we add and subtract very frequently because sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I think if you're afraid to do that, go work somewhere else. Okay, this game is not for you. Okay, if you're afraid to evaluate your talent internally and externally, I might add, and admit that you made a mistake, then you will fail. Okay, you will not succeed. And so if I had to give some advice, Joey, to anyone listening here on how to do this, I would say those three things, in that order, are pretty important to continuously monitor.
Kevin, I deeply appreciate that insight, and also just the tactical steps that someone can take to go out and execute on building a partnership.
Sure.
Thank you. Tanveer, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Kevin spoke right spot on. I think when it comes to international expansion, I think Kevin has essentially laid out the playbook, right? And it's just something that you have to trust the process and follow it, and not try to be too disruptive. So I think that's essentially what it is. And for us, it was always both in India and US, having and maintaining relationship with the end user. So in all of our partnerships, I think we were just like, whenever we had an opportunity with the end user, we're not only just discussing the product, the problem, we were also doing like, hey, look, this is what we are trying to do, in company structuring, and this is the companies that we are trying to collaborate with, and all that. And I think the end users tell you, right? Your customers tell you, you just need to be a good listener. So I think that's essentially what we did. And it so happened that the Indus-X program before, and I think now it's called the Trust program, between India and US, also was launched during this period. And because of that, there were a lot of delegations that were coming from the US to India, from India to US, and the end users had an opportunity, to visit our office here in Bangalore. People from Department of War, AFRL, and a lot of state governments also, if I'm not wrong, have visited us, seen what we are doing here, and I think that gave them a lot of confidence on our capability when they're seeing our capabilities in action, our products being used by customers over here, and they just kept us, going in right direction. And in fact, I think there was also a joint challenge between DIU and DIO, and a space domain awareness challenge. We ended up winning that as well. So that sort of helped, getting a lot of goodwill from the US customers. And overall, I think when it comes to military customers, they would like to buy cutting edge components first. The technology should be really good. It should be working. It should be proven. they would like to push the boundaries of the technologies. And Kevin, I think you're working with the Navy over here. I think you would resonate the same. Among the forces, the most aggressive and risk taking. So I think the right first customer you're talking, Indian Navy. But I think you must be facing problems that it's not very easy to get in touch with them. So that's one challenge in India, but I think in the US, it's relatively easy. And as Kevin said, there are very few conferences that happen, very few trade shows that happen. You attend a few, you meet everybody. So you will be very surprised to know how small the community is, how small the circle of important stakeholders for your businesses, and how these are the same stakeholders attending all of these conferences, right? So if you start attending a few, you'll be able to, get all the interaction that you want with your end customers and other stakeholders that are involved in the process. So I think uh, attending these trade shows, reaching out to the, in India, US at least, we have the trust program, figuring out opportunities where you can go on a government delegations to different countries that boosts a lot, that gives you an access that, trade shows don't. And essentially finding one soft landing zone. For us, it was SDA Tab Lab. I think finding one soft landing opportunity gives you a very good head start.
Tanveer, thanks for those additional insights into this process. And both of you have hinted at, hey, it's important to be local. It's important to find that soft landing spot. Can you tell me a little bit more, as much as you're willing to publicly share, about what business structures have you used to engage with the other country? You've mentioned partnerships. You've mentioned standing up an entity, 27 different relationships you have. So Tanveer, I'll pass it back to you to talk a little bit about the structure that Digantara has, and then over to Kevin for Ocean Heroes.
I think for us, again, guided by our end users, we have set up a subsidiary in Colorado Springs. It's very close to a lot of defense space activities that is happening in the US. We are literally walking distance away from one of the agencies of DOW. So that sort of really, I think we got the location right. We got, if I'm not sure, FOCI mitigation or it's a procedure for any foreign companies. If they have to work with the subsidiaries with DOW, we'll have to go through some sort of a regulatory process. We underwent that, and I think that gave our end users really good confidence. And what we also had made it clear from day one is we are not coming to the US only to exploit the sales opportunity. We do want to do business, but we would want to also build technology in the US for the US customers, right? So right now, I think just this week, we have announced we have raised around 50 million in funding, and I think in that about 10 million is something that we are about 10 million is something that we are investing in the US entity, wherein we are setting up a team of US citizens and having the capability to build technology in-house within the US. Because one of the key hurdles that you'll have to navigate as you're an Indian company is you'll not have access to a lot of information and opportunities if you're not a citizen, right? So setting up a base entity in the US with a team that is comprising of US citizens, I think that is what is working for us, and that is what our customers are liking, and that's essentially gives us the confidence to make those investment decisions and scale our presence in US. And I think that's essentially what we are looking for. And right now, that has also opened door for more opportunities of DOW. I think that's something that we are really excited about.
Henry, thanks for sharing that. Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, I think Tanveer's echoed the sentiment around being local. You got to have local people. You need local expertise. If you're going to raise money, some of it should be in the target. If you're not going to do that, you ought to be spending it in the target. So I think all that makes a lot of sense to me. Joe, I would say if anyone is listening here that is looking for kind of things to think about in terms of what you're trying to solve for, I would say any business that's going to execute in another country needs to think about predominantly two different avenues that you want to lock down right away. Okay, the first is your degree of revenue or profit sharing. You can pick the one you like best, okay, and there are nuances in each of those, which over a cup of coffee I'll tell you more about. But revenue and profit share is the first axis. And the second axis is kind of what Tanveer was saying with local employees is, are you going to build there or not? Are you going to manufacture there or not? And once you decide on those two variables and how those two variables are going to transact very specifically with your partner's income statement and balance sheet, okay? What I mean by that, Joey, is it doesn't work if you're just bouncing off the surface with high-level theoretics, you're going to have a bad partnership. You want to understand exactly how each of those income statements and balance sheets works for profit, revenue, and the manufacturing sharing. And in that vein, there are, what I like to say is what we talk about all the time in Ocean Aero, there are three ways to do that, okay? If you think about it as a spectrum of your options, way over here, you've got simple commercial agreements, okay? It doesn't need to get any more complicated than that. You'll do this, I'll do this is what you get, this is what I get. This is the way Ocean Aero prefers to do business, okay? In all cases where we have choice, commercial agreements is what we're gonna do, okay? Now, way over here, you've got the establishment of formalized joint ventures. Okay, so joint ventures, you own this, I own this. We have an entity that does X, Y, and Z. And that is where all business will route through. And then, not to make this an accounting lesson, but then you have intercompany eliminations in between the joint ventures and the home companies. It does require additional finance staff and capabilities around reporting in multiple different countries, but that is the other side of that spectrum. And in between that spectrum, you have simpler things like I can establish a legal entity like Ocean Aero has around the world. It doesn't have to be a joint venture. It's a little bit deeper than just purely a commercial agreement. And honestly, I would only really do that if it was for a legal requirement. So there are some countries in this world where you cannot act unless you have a legal entity. There are countries in this world where you can act, but you're not eligible for funding in either, for example, the European Union or the United States or any other governing body that may have what I'll call super funds above a particular country. And so you just got to get smart around where you're doing business and what the rules are in place for commercial agreements, legal entity establishment, joint ventures. And then once you do that, you can go and do the other thing I said, revenue, profit share, you're going to do manufacturing centers. But you got to think about all those, both elements of what I just mentioned, I think are very important. The other, while we're on the subject, the other trick you might think about, and Tanveer and I have both talked about this morning, it's an abbreviation, ICFC. Okay, in country, for country. Okay, this is the acronym that industry uses to delineate between exporting versus building it there. Okay, for example, in India right now, we are continuing the very long exercise of taking the entire bill of materials for our Triton in the hundreds and thousands and sourcing every single one through different vendors in India. Okay, versus exporting or drop shipping inventory from the United States or elsewhere. That is in country, for country. The interesting thing that we find around the world is that it is very much more attractive to local governments to do ICFW, in country, for world. Okay, so it's much more attractive for the Indian economy if you don't just build it in India for India. You're building it in India and then shipping it to Singapore, okay, or Australia or Indonesia or anything preferably regional around there, which should open you up to funding opportunities beyond the scope of your immediate target, the Indian Navy. And, Aryan, this is something I think DIO can help with. It's something that there are different agencies in the United States that already help with. It's how do you help tell that story and reward companies who do that? So, for example, the Indian Navy may only have $10 million to spend with me, but if you have another 50, then could you combine all of this together for the Indian Navy as 60 But in return, India gets a manufacturing facility that then exports regionally, and that can be an agreement between the two organizations. Just something to think about. It's something we talk about every day here around the world, that I think Australia does well. I think NATO and its countries do very well. I think India might look into that, something that along those lines might help everybody.
Yeah, I think where Kevin is getting at is, both countries agreeing for a, fund allocation for the trust instrument that is existing between both of us.
Yep. And having this is a great lead off to my next question is, what are the challenges you both see, and what suggestions do you have for the respective countries to make it easier to work in India, to make it easier to work in the United States? What would you change? What would you recommend is done differently?
Joey, I'd say if you could pick two countries that are the longest cycle, hardest governments to work with, you've got them on this phone call right now. Okay. So it's like India and America are the worst. Okay. We're bureaucratic. It is very complicated. And so I would recommend two things. One, you need to find some experts who know how this works. Okay. By the way, there's a lot of people who think they know how it works. I guarantee you 99 out of 100 of them don't. You got to find the ones that actually know how the systems work. And because you're not going to figure it out on your own in any time span that you are happy with. Okay. You can figure it out. It's going to take you years. One, go hire some people who know what they're doing. The second thing is I think you got to go meditate on a mountain and commune with nature, okay, and get patience. Because if you think you're going to sell to the American military apparatus in the next few months, you're just wrong, okay? It's going to take you years. Same thing in India. It's going to take you years. I mean, Ocean Aero has done at cost demonstrations where we fly in very expensive pieces of equipment, transport them to military bases, around India and do demonstrations. We did that 18 months ago. And it is still going to be a long time before we activate on the contracts that we have lined up. There is just no way to slice it, Joey. You're just going to have patience. And you're going to have the capital and balance sheet to do that. You're going to have the dedication to human resources to do that. And you're going to have to get smart about that particular system very quickly. I think we're actually moving very quickly in India, and our partners in Anadrone are doing a very good job for us there, working together as a team. But I would say those two things are something you got to get your head on straight pretty quickly if you're going to do some work here.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Kevin over here. So, international sort of expansion is not something that one single playbook that you could, sort of consider for every country. So, what works with India in India, like let's say for Kevin when he's entering India, the exact strategy if I would use for entering US unlikely to work. So these are two separate highways, and it has two separate rules. So that's essentially something that you should be sensitive about. Kevin mentioned about the JV route. That's something that really works very well in India, right? But I'm not sure if that's the right way to do it in US. Here again, for us, we were applying for some programs and got selected by Rapid Capabilities Office, where we were paired with Anduril, where Anduril and Digantara could jointly work towards a much larger problem statement. So I think uh, while I agree with Kevin that aligning with two governments, especially India and US, is challenging, but I think we're heading in that right in that direction. Like for example, the challenge that are joint challenges that are coming out as part of trust between India and US. I think just scaling of that effort, I think that would create a immense, like a very robust soft landing zone for both Indian companies and US companies, as Kevin said. If there is a budget that can be allocated and that can increase the procurement power or purchasing power for Kevin Indian Navy, for us the US Space Force. I think that's a really interesting idea.
Tanveer, Kevin, thank you both for sharing the challenges you see and sort of the need for patience in this process. I am encouraged from being one of the co-founders of AFWorks to now being at DIU, that we are working to address that speed and bureaucracy issue, and we're going to continue doing so. And that is our intent as a department, and it is being shown through programs we're pushing, but it needs to happen more. And that is a clear message that I hear here. We are going to open it up for Q&A in just a moment. So if you have questions, please jump into the question and answer section and type them in, and then I will make sure to review those and get back to it. I have one last question for our amazing panelists, and I'm actually going to combine two into one. So what resources would you share that are the most helpful in helping figure out how to work with the respective other country? And then is there any piece of parting advice that you would like to share to make sure that the attendees and future folks know when they're thinking about this kind of process?
Yeah, I think speaking on the Indian side, I guess, I would say there's an organization called USISPF. There are many of them, but that one is a big one and it's pretty good. I like their leadership. I like their communication. I think they have access. For example, I've had lunch with the defense minister of India, right, and have gone to the embassy a couple times for different events where they are very, very good at coordinating activities between the nations. I would say that's one resource you should check into. And then obviously the embassy itself, the defense attaches, and in my space, the defense attaches are very helpful. They've been down to Gulfport and they've walked through our facility and seen the demonstrations and have been very, very, very helpful. I can't say enough about how good the defense attaché shop here from India is in Washington, D.C. I think if you're not tapping into that, that's kind of silly. And then vice versa, the American embassies there in Delhi and in India as a whole can be very helpful from the commercial space to help connect dots as well. And they're going to have their ear to the ground and they're going to know some local partners that are going to make the most sense and they can recommend things like that to you. So, if you're an American taxpayer, if you're an American company, your government has far-reaching intel, commercial and otherwise. You're crazy if you don't take advantage of that. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Those are phenomenal resources, Kevin. Thank you. Tanveer, any resources that you've used or want to highlight?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Kevin. There are essentially, three locations that you should be having your eye on. First one are the trade shows, right? And use the trade shows to get all the connections that you would want. And really coming to my point too, you have to use trade shows to get connected to your end user. Right. Once the end user is in, the momentum changes. You'll see the change in momentum. Right. These are the user trade shows get the end user confidence. Once that happens, it's relatively a easier process. And finally, embassies, I'm sure the US embassy over here and the Indian embassy in US, they really want these kind of collaborations to happen. I think that what decides their pay grade, if I'm not wrong. That these kind of collaborations take place. So they would really know a lot of diplomatic channels and opportunities that are existing that are not very mainstream, and they'll get you onboarded over there. I think trade shows, end users, embassies are the three key areas where you should start working with. And I think you mentioned about parting advice. Just know that when you're going international, I'm pretty sure it's true for India as well. It takes some time to build trust and build momentum, right? It takes some time to get the first orders, and scaling that first orders to first few orders takes some time. But once that happens, the momentum is relatively robust, right? Once the trust, good thing, I mean, the good thing about governments and militaries is once they trust you, they hold on to that trust for quite some time, right? So it's a momentum that doesn't change quite often. So you'll have to have the kind of long-term vision with respect to uh, uh, you know uh, uh, while you're going international, and essentially avoid a mindset that okay, there's a deadline in next 6 months, we'll prototype something really quickly and would like to get a rapid response from the market. I think that's not going to happen.
Tanveer, thanks for sharing. I think both of you have covered an amazing swath of topics, right? From how do you initiate a partnership to identifying, are you making sure you're right on the revenue and profit sharing side? Are you a right cultural fit in just how you operate? How are you building your business? And then Tanveer, I think you summed it up pretty nicely, right? This whole international work is built on a foundation of trust and finding the right partners, finding the right customers, engaging with the end users, right? That trust to say we are building the best product in the world that is going to solve your problem. And so I appreciate you both for highlighting and pulling all of this together to give a lot of insightful tidbits on what companies should be doing here. This has been one of my favorite webinars, so thank you both for that. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So if anybody has questions and they want to have answered, please jump and put those into the Q&A section. We have one that came through that I think will actually end up being another webinar that we could do. But it is, the anonymous question came in of, how did you decide on pricing in the other respective country? And so we have only a few more minutes. So if you could give just a few short sentences on this. Tanveer, I'll start with you.
I think for us, the first set of contracts, I think SDA Develop has a fixed sort of a pricing. Like no matter what you do, you get that as your first set of contracts. So that had been relatively simple. And I think for the next set of it, we have relatively straightforward pricing strategies that we already have it in India, and we are more or less extending similar pricing benefits, adjusting to the models. Like all the costing that we incur in India is slightly different from what we incur in US. So adjusting to those kind of bottom line, and essentially I think it's a similar way of going ahead with the pricing. So we're not sort of having drastically different mindset when it comes to pricing for the Indian customers and the US customers. And at least I think that's what is working as part of go-to market. And I think what we are good at is building cutting edge satellite payloads at at a competitive price. That's what we have demonstrated in India, and I think that is what we'll be demonstrating with all the technologies that we are building in the US with the entire US team as well. So I think that's something that we understand very well.
Yeah, I agree, Tanveer. I think you're best served to have the prices be as similar as possible. At Ocean Aero, we have a set price. We don't change it for anywhere in the world. We have one price for the United States, whether that is through direct government transaction or through foreign military sales transactions. And then we have one price for everyone else, both commercial and direct commercial sales to the host country of choice. So in our case, there is no deviation from that. Not now, not ever. And that's kind of what we stick to.
Yeah, just keep the prices same.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we do have a difference in price. It's just there are two prices: American government, and everyone else, right? So, and they never change. Yeah. So, and they're not very far apart.
Thanks for that. Those are the quick, short answers that we needed for today. We got a question in from Naseem is, what are the benefits India gets by these effective strategies that defense tech companies are doing? So I think he's trying to ask here of, hey, what do you see are the benefits that are happening in India as a result of these dual use companies now selling in both nations?
Joey, I'd say if I understand the question correctly, it's what does India get out of this, right? From hosting dual use technologies. Look, I'd say technology is only useful to you if it exists so that you can buy it. Okay. Dual use, all that is really doing for you is giving you an off cyclical outlet. for sales. And so when military spending is down, generally commercial spending is up, and vice versa. It's a rare day when both are down and both are up. And so you're just simply creating a better ecosystem of things you can buy in the first place. Said another way, you could have the world's best, I don't know, fighter jet. But if there is a period of 3 or 4 years where no one is buying that fighter jet, on year 5, you're not going to have the option to buy one in the first place. Okay, so by having two countries buy the same technology, by having dual use in both commercial and military, you are simply growing and making more resilient the ecosystem of what you can buy. In the United States, and Joey knows this, there is a very big discussion around the industrial base. Does the industrial base of the United States have the ability to maintain a wartime readiness? Heaven forbid that should come to pass. And there are lots of opinions on this, but all I know is that unless multiple countries are reinforcing each other's companies of the best, the Western world will soon lose the ability to do that. So, necessarily, if you're asking what do we get out of this, what you're getting out of this is the option to purchase the most advanced capabilities on the planet. Period.
I appreciate that. And I think I want to tag on one of the points you both have made earlier, and that is the relationship that US and India have is one built on trust and democracy and a desire to grow and build together. And this is one of the ways that we get to do that, right? Is through these, as simple as it might seem, these educational webinar series, right? Is how we build the foundation so there are more companies that can sell in respective other countries.
That's right. That's exactly right.
This is the little bit of steps and work, right, that bring us closer together. So,
well, the alternative, Joey, is a state-owned enterprise which controls both innovation and the demand signal. Look, you take your bet on which form of government is better. I know which one I'm betting on. I just think both countries share that same belief, and we better make sure that keeps going. So.
Yes, 100%. All right, so I will say, hey, we answered a few audience questions, and this has been one of the most fun webinars to host. And seriously, thank you, Kevin, thank you, Tanveer, and thank you to your respective companies for taking the time to tell this story, and for all the work you've put in and the patience that you've put in to figure out how to sell in the respective other countries. I appreciate the specific, insightful actions that companies can take around attending trade shows, how to vet people, building business models that work. So thank you both for doing that. I'll leave it to you for any quick last comments and then over to Aryan for closing.
No, I just say thanks for hosting us, Joey, Arwen. No other really closing comments. I just think, to your point, everybody just keep at it, okay? We only fail if we stop trying together, okay? So I love stuff like this. I love that both governments are collaboratively bringing in commerce and private industry. The more we do of this, the better off we are. The more relationships we build, the better. So just thanks for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, both DIU and DIO for having us today. And it's usually all great initiatives have started with conversations, and I think it's good to have conversations, and it's good to do them consistently. It will be really nice to sort of see these conversations evolve into a mutual soft landing instrument. I think that's really something that would be a best scenario outcome over here. So I think I'll be really looking forward to that, and I think I'm sure Kevin and anything that we could do to in making this a soft landing support as a real instrument, I think we'll be happy to do.
Thank you, Tanveer. Aryan, any closing comments?
No, I think, Joey, I'll rely on the session, and I totally agree with you that this is one of my favorite sessions of Gurukul as well. It's very informative, very crisp, and I hope it has been very fruitful as well for our audience as well. I just want to mention that if you have any feedback with respect to how we could improve the sessions and any suggestions on which topics we should bring forward to in our next sessions, feel free to drop in so that we could work on it and we can bring more sessions to you as well. And I would like to thank our both speakers for your wonderful insights and Joey for that wonderful moderation. And yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you attending.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Take care.